two. Take two. You only make history once. And oh, come on in. And today you're all making history with me. How exciting is this? My new book called Winds of Spirit, and I'm Renee Baribeau, is coming out with Hay House, and it's not out yet. It's coming out on February 6th, so you are seeing it first. And actually, know who saw it first was the other night. I waited and waited for the delivery, and this talk is about how to put everyday ritual into your life so you can navigate change effortlessly. And what do I mean by that? Well, like the other day, I was waiting and waiting because I had heard at work that they had received copies of the book there that somebody else had ordered for a show I have coming up. But I was home, sitting there with my cold, waiting and waiting for the UPS guy. And so then, finally, I crawl out of bed at about 5, and I'm there like, where's my book? So I go open the door, and there in front of me is a messy sidewalk. I mean, there was grapefruit leaves scattered between the front door and the front gate. And, you know, these nattering winds said, is this how you want to receive your book? And I thought, So then I thought, well, I better not go out front in my pajamas. So then I put some clothes on, brushed my hair, went back out, and I had happened to have bought a new broom the week before. And so I went and swept the walk with my new broom, and then I came back inside, and these nattering winds said, well, what about a little ceremony? You know, maybe a candle. So I thought, okay, candle, lit a candle. And then I was like, well, you always are talking about wind walks. Why don't you take a wind walk around your development while you wait for the UPS driver? And they're like, okay, you know. It's like easy to write this stuff, but then you've got to really live it every day, because otherwise it's just a book with words on paper. But if you don't start to live what you're believing, then you're not really standing in your truth. So I took a walk around there, and then about 8 o'clock at night, I'm there like, well, okay, the book is just not coming today, right? So I get on the phone, start talking to a good friend of mine, and bing, there's the doorbell. And standing in front of me now with the swept sidewalk and the candles, and I've got a fire going in the fireplace, and and then I blew the wind whistle, which you'll get to experience today, and I pulled a wind card, and I was ready. And then the book showed up, and there was this man who was this bright UPS driver with bright, clear eyes. You know, and it's 8:30 at night, and he could have said, I said, could you come in while I open the box of books and take a picture? Aww. And you know UPS drivers, they're on a deadline. So he says, okay. So he comes in, takes a video of me, takes a picture of me at 8:30 at night, and I said, oh, you must be supposed to get the first signed book. So I signed a book over to him, and then 2 nights later when he was delivering another case of the books, he said, I am so looking forward to reading your book this weekend. And that to me was how these winds work in my life. And trust me, I was the resistant, the unpractical. You know, I've been a business coach for years. So when the wind started to speak to me, I was like, oh no, not me. Like Audrey will tell you, I always used to make fun of people who channeled. Channeled? You know, like what are you talking about? That's, you know, I'm a business coach. I work with top level executives. No. And all of a sudden I started to listen to these winds. And it wasn't even me who heard them the first time. Here I'm working with a client, and let me give you a little profile of this client. So she's in her early 70s, and she'd retired from a career of banking and law, and had worked in places, you know, like the White House. And I started to blow the wind whistle for her. And all of a sudden, we're having these experiences on our coaching calls because she wanted to become a writer. You know, she was going for her next career. And these wind forces came up from the caves of time. That's the best way I could tell you. And they started to, you know, show themselves as energetics. And by this time it caught my imagination, I must say, because I thought I was writing a book that my mother would read. Mom, if you're listening, that's true. I wrote this book called The Shaman Chef, How Cooking Saved My Life, and then my mother didn't talk to me for a year. And it was really a really cathartic moment because for, all the years of my life, I was like you did this, you did that, na 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 na. Well, now that I've written this book, I understand what my mother's job was to raise somebody who would bring forth a book that's this monumental. It wasn't probably an easy task because when I look back, the winds have set up everything in my life at this moment. Now, when I first got a notion that I was writing a book on the winds, I said to Spirit, people hate the wind. Who's going to read this book you want me to spend the next 5 years writing? And what I didn't know was the reason that we have a tumultuous relationship with the wind is because we lost touch with the wind as a power greater than ourselves, that's invisible, that we can't see. And so I'm sitting up in front of you today telling you that you can learn to navigate your life by going outside, having the wind hit you on the side of your face, taking a wind walk, and getting answers. Does that sound crazy? Get ready to get up and leave? I was. So, if you think that, that's fine. But as I started to explore, what I realized was that before religion divided the wind, there was wind. Then in the Christian faith, the wind became Holy Spirit. And in the Jewish tradition, wind is Ruach. And in the Buddhist tradition, wind is Nirvana. They were wind. And so before religion, people were wind believers. Because all of our experience was based on nature. And how do we travel through nature? Well, if you were a hunter-gatherer, and I'm not saying we're all going to go back and be hunter-gatherers, but if we use some of the principles that the hunter-gatherers and early farmers used, we can learn to navigate these tumultuous times that we're in now. Now, who would agree that last year was tumultuous?
Oh, yeah.
Come on, there was earthquakes, hurricanes. My younger sister called me one day. She said, what do you think of all of these big windstorms? And I said, I think my book is perfectly timed and it's going to be a bestseller. And so the truth is that now when I want a piece of information, hi Aunt Annie, how are you? Thank you so much for coming. When I need a piece of information, no lie, I would take these wind walks at night. I'd go out my door, it's this simple, and ask a question. I'd wait for the wind to all I have to do is feel it, see it in the trees or something, and then I would take a walk. Truthfully, the lessons that I started to get when I would take these wind walks, and you might say, oh, well, that's just like mindfulness, and it might be, would be like, hey, Renee, this wind power, we've been cut off from this wind power for 2,000 years, and it's time that we start to become more wind-powered in our life. So what does that mean? Well, I thought I would tell you. So first, let me tell you who I am, now that you heard this whole story about my family and my mother not talking to me. But let me tell you, the winds healed my relationship with my mother. Because what happened was when she read The Shaman Chef, How Cooking Saved My Life, and she didn't have a place to communicate with me on it. She saw that I was an angry woman who had an abusive father that she really didn't want put on the clothesline, even though he's been dead for 30 years. But she didn't understand that that was the process of my healing, to get there. But that said, my mother and I have healed to the point where now I talk to her every week. She's in Maine. And the other day, she couldn't wait to get a copy of my new book. And hopefully I've healed enough that the way that I tell the stories now comes from a perspective of, this is your healed daughter speaking, who's done 5 years worth of research on the wind, and can tell you, that if nothing else, if you don't buy the spiritual jargon in it, the research is double and triple checked by Hay House, so it's pretty good. So, but what does this have to do with you in navigating change? So shamans, this sweater is from one of my other clients, who she sent it to me for Christmas, and it's some designer, Gwyneth Paltrow or something. Now everyone is cool to have a shaman. That shamans speak, it's hand, you know, it's nuts. I love it, thank you. Thanks, Sophie, if you're listening. And the shaman